Welcome to another episode of Up To. 9 years ago, Up To started as a live event series showcasing leaders who are as humble as they are successful. The humility piece is extremely important as we identify leaders who can inspire others. We try to focus our interviews on the non-business aspects of their lives. And in doing so, we have found there's a real thirst to explore their hearts and minds in atypical ways. Our host, as always, is Adam Kaufman. And on this episode, we are joined by Dale Jones.
During the first season of the Up To podcast, I had several companies and entrepreneurs approach me about potential partnerships, but I'm really selective before choosing to do something like that. One choice we did make, happily, is to partner with Vivid Front, a full-service digital marketing and website design agency based in Cleveland that works with both local and national brands. They've built their entire client base on referrals, and they've won a lot of awards, including the 2019 Inc. magazine Top 5,000 Fastest Growing Companies, North Coast's Top Places to Work, and several others. They're known for their talent, they're known for their creativity, they're known for their culture, a firm I liked before we agreed to partner together for the show. Check out vividfront.com, or you can email me and I'll introduce you to their dynamic leader, Andrew Spott. Our guest today is one of the world's top CEO and board leadership consultants. He currently serves as the Washington, D.C.-based CEO of Diversified Search Group, a leading national executive search firm that's been in business for more than 45 years. He previously served as vice chairman of Heidrick & Struggles, another huge firm in the search industry. Our guest focuses exclusively on finding and attracting CEO and board-level talent for clients seeking authentic and diverse leadership. I love that. He's particularly adept at identifying those with heartfelt desires to serve others, like himself, combined with competencies in context, maybe we'll delve into that are often difficult to find. His client list comprises both brand name companies that we would all know as consumers and also niche firms, some Fortune 500 companies and also major hospitals and nonprofits too. He has literally reached the very pinnacle of his industry. He's just the type of guest we like to have on the Up To podcast. He's reached the top of his field. He's earned the reputation of being the best at what he does, and he recently won his industry's highest award, which was a big deal, of course. Unlike most of his peers, one of the many things I like about him is that he himself has been a corporate board member and continues to contribute as a leader, not just picking other leaders or telling others how to be leaders. He does it himself. Hughes Supply Company, Kohl's Corporation, Chick-fil-a, and Northwestern Mutual Corporation are some of the examples, in addition to nonprofit leadership on the Morehouse College board and the Special Olympics and the Salvation Army as well. He's frequently quoted in the media and contributes regularly as a speaker and instructor at Georgetown University. On the personal side, Dale's passion to help others fully realize their potential stems from a lifelong commitment to service. A native of Dallas, he grew up as the son of a shoe cobbler, and a teacher. On Saturdays, he and his twin brother would often go to work with their father and help clean office buildings. This value and his heritage would lead our guest today to apply and enroll at Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, which set him on this very meaningful path that we're going to delve into today. Ever since I started this program, honestly, I've wanted our guest today to be on the show for 4 seasons now. And now that we're based in D.C., we're able to do it. He's a very busy human being. But Dale Jones, welcome to Up To.
Adam, thank you. Great to be here.
What have you been up to?
Well, we've been very busy in terms of work. Our clients have huge demands for leadership and to find the best people in their organizations who can transform the organization but also transform lives and create impact. So it's been a busy time for us as a firm.
And what about you on the personal side? Have you been busy at home as well, or are you working 100% of the time?
Well, I'm trying to create more margin in my life. My wife and I have been married for 32 years, and we have 2 adult children. And so Yolanda and I enjoy going to museums, to the movies. We are foodies. We love travel. She plays tennis. I play at golf. We work out. And so between working out and our involvement in church and community, all those things bring lots of joy and meaning to us.
I know you're so busy. I've known you now for 7 years, but you always seem happy. And I'm sure there are unhappy moments. But do you believe in this life balance pursuit? I personally don't. I feel like I'm always having fun, or at least trying while I'm working. And even when I'm not working, and if I'm just doing something having fun, I still have work thoughts in my mind. I feel like I'm doing both at all times. Maybe that's bad, but that works for me. Like I was going to the bank a couple of days ago to come here, and the teller asked me, oh, you're going on a trip. I was taking out some cash. Is this a work trip or a pleasure trip? And I was like, well, it's kind of both. I always do both. So I don't know how you feel about that, but now that your kids are out of the home, are you able to balance more, or do you not even worry about that?
Well, I think I've always tried to balance over the years and have failed at it most times until I finally realized that there are seasons in your life, and you have to know what season you're in and live in that season. Mm-hmm. And so there were the seasons of soccer games and lacrosse games. There were the seasons of activities that our kids were involved in, or we were involved in with them. And then there were seasons where, as now, where they're not around. Mm-hmm. They've got their own lives as adults. And so we find that finding margin and balance is a work of art. But the truth is, I think too many of us beat ourselves up in trying to get there.
Right.
But for me, it's been more of an integrated journey, much like what you just described.
Okay.
That can I work and enjoy it? Can I work with people that I enjoy working with?
Right.
And can I do things that bring pleasure and have impact, but also create value? And so if we can work with the people we enjoy working with and have them as friends as well, it can create a nice balance where you're not trying to sort of move in and out of these places in order to gain friendships and relationships.
Right. True relationships. One of the many reasons I've been eager to have you on this program is because you have this enviable seat at the table, so to speak, of seeing so many different leaders. You're recruiting leaders for positions, you're training leaders, you're co-working with other leaders, you're on boards with leaders. This show is about leaders who are as humble as they are successful, and I find humility is rare the higher up the totem pole, so to speak. Why do you think humility is so rare, or is it just hard to show when you're in a leadership position? I've never been able to ask anyone that before, as qualified as you are.
Well, I think in many ways we live in a world where humility is an understated leadership attribute and is not seen as a strength, but perhaps as a weakness. And so people...
Isn't that a shame?
Yeah, it is. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But folks will bypass humility because they don't see it as a strength. They see it as a weakness. And yet, it's the humility of one's own style that enables them to bring a team together.
Right.
As someone said to me, how do you get to humility? I says, well, you first have to get to gratitude. Because if you can be grateful for the people around you and express gratitude for their helping you accomplish what you accomplish, it speaks to a level of humility that I can't do it by myself. I have to do it with other people. And so it is an understated attribute, but I think one that enables people to be far more successful than they ever thought they could be if they are genuinely and authentically humble in how they operate and how they care for people, and not see it as a weakness, but really as a strength.
And ironically, folks love being led by humble leaders. I don't know what book taught us you had to be leading only by strength. And I know we're all familiar with the buck stops here phraseology.
Right.
Hear me roar. I'm the big, strong man. I'm the boss.
Yes.
Leading by memo. But I've talked to so many of our listeners and viewers of this program who are inspired by people like you, where the humility clearly comes naturally. But I don't know why more leaders don't do this, because they'd be more effective leaders.
That's right. Well, what we've found is that leaders who've had experiences that have challenged them in their lives, whether it be personal or professional,
Or health or something.
or health,
Yeah.
have learned some things oftentimes through those tragedies or through those experiences.
Yes.
And oftentimes that will help develop within them the level of empathy and humility that's needed to lead.
Good word, yeah.
The former chairman of McKinsey once said to me that as I'm looking for leaders, one of the things I want to know is if she or he has ever had a failed rung in his or her life.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, wow, that's an interesting attribute or an interesting sort of theme.
Right.
And I have found that when people have had a failed rung, either personally or professionally, and they've gone through something and they've learned from it, there have been lessons learned, then that oftentimes mature them in their leadership style and their ability to connect with people and to lead effectively. But sometimes, the opposite can happen. You can become bitter by those experiences and withdraw and not lean in and self-author the experience that you need to have in order to grow and become better at what you do.
I call that navigating curves in the road. We're all going to face curves in the road,
Yes.
but how are we going to navigate them? Are we going to crash, or are we going to successfully slow down and maybe get through it and learn from that curve in the road? I can remember, Dale, for me, and then I'm going to ask you if you have an example to share. My first marriage ended much sooner than I expected it to. And I remember having this monumental, just for me, I was the only one there, but monumental for me dinner by myself in like the men's grill of my little country club in Cleveland, Ohio. And I had this grand plan for my life, this blueprint that I wrote, that how my life was going to go perfectly. And I was having this mental conversation with myself, and I was realizing that that blueprint's gone. I need to just crumble it up and throw it away. Or, like you just said, I can wallow in despair and anger and frustration and depression. But I decided to just throw it away. And in my case, my faith system allowed me to, turn over that blueprint to the higher power. But then that set me on a much better course. But I would have not have learned without navigating these curves in the road. And I'm sorry I'm talking longer than I expected to, but you touched on something that means a lot to me, that I wouldn't be who I am today without having to navigate that major curve in the road. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. It is those missteps, it's those moments of misfortune that oftentimes become the defining moments for our lives.
That's right.
And how we respond to them will be the teacher for how we lead and care for other people.
Have you had any curve in the road, whether it's health or financial, career, personal, that really helped you now as you reflect backwards become who you are?
I've had a number of those. The earliest one in my life is my mother developed cancer. She was 45 and passed away and left my dad a widower to raise 3 sons.
I didn't know that.
And so
young.
that was a major defining moment for me to lose our mother, but also to watch my father grieve the loss of his wife and be left to raise 3 sons. And then my father's health deteriorated just a few years after her passing away, and he continued to be the shoe repairman by day and the cobbler by night. But what I found in that experience was that my dad never considered himself to be a victim. He never said, "Oh, woe is me, life has left me, in a bad place." He may have felt that, but he never said it. And he continued to press his way on until he passed away a few years back. He never remarried, but he lived for creating a better life and opportunity for his sons that he wanted us to have, even though he had such great misfortune at a young age and left with 3 sons to motivate and inspire. So that was a deep sort of turning point for me. And then we've had other, what I call dark nights of the soul on the journey we've been on. And we've had to lean into them, although we don't look forward to them, but we also have tried to say what are we to learn or experience as we go through this, and then those become the teachers for us to be able to help comfort others as they walk through life's challenges as well.
For sure. Do these types of topics come up when you're recruiting CEOs for companies that hire you, or for board candidates that you need to present in front of companies, or is it more the qualifications on paper of what they've done in their background, or do these, what I call kind of touchy-feely subjects, come up at all?
They do, especially with the work I do and our firm, because I always ask candidates to tell me their story.
Oh, you do? Okay.
And when I ask them, typically they revert to the resume. And I'll say, well, I already have your resume, and I've seen your LinkedIn profile, so I don't need you to rehearse that. But I do want to know more about you. And I say, if who you are is what you do, then who are you when you cease doing what you do? So I really want to know what people are all about. And
not just their work identity.
Not just their work identity, but what kinds of experiences have they leaned into, and what kinds of lessons have they learned, and what kinds of things have they done to develop people, to develop themselves, to create impact and value in organizations and in community. And so that does take you to a deeper level. And sometimes candidates get a little uncomfortable because you're now going into a space that some would prefer not to go.
Right.
They'd rather stick with the resume as opposed to talking about hurdles or challenges or disappointments in life. And but it's at that point where you really get to know who people are.
For sure.
What their values are, how they handle difficulty, how they navigate through the bends in the road, as you just mentioned. Yeah. And so then you get a better picture of leaders and leadership from those individuals.
I love that you do that. And I say the same thing when I'm talking to like an entrepreneur or a founder of a company with my day job of venture capital, and I'm trying to get to know them, and they tell me everything that they've done professionally. I literally say what you do. I've already reviewed your LinkedIn profile. I know what school you went to. We don't have to focus on that. Tell me these more meaningful stories that you're sharing right now. That's awesome you do that. Actually, I should have maybe said this at the beginning. What does for those who don't know, what is a search firm? What is an executive search firm?
Well, executive search firms are essentially a form of strategy consulting, helping companies with their human capital strategy. It is how do we find the best leaders to lead our organizations, whether it be hospitals or foundations or corporations. And search firms, typically we recruit leaders for organizations based upon the competencies they're looking for.
Okay.
They're the technical competencies they need, and then they're the leadership competencies they're looking for, and then there's a fit around culture. So a firm like ours, we're hired by corporations and organizations to help the organization understand what they're looking for, and then we develop what we call a job specification.
So they may not even know, what they're looking for. They just know they have 2 slots they need to fill.
Right.
But then what are the gaps maybe in your board that you need filled?
That's right. It may be for the board, or it may be the CEO is about to retire in a couple of years.
Yeah.
Or someone who's not performing well that they need to transition out of the company, or they need to create a pipeline of talent for the future. And so we're involved in CEO succession or C-suite succession, and it can be CEO, CFO, Chief Financial Officer, Chief Marketing Officer. It can be Chief Supply Chain Officer, et cetera.
And I know you've worked with huge companies like Pepsi and Chick-fil-A, and the biggest companies there are in America. And I imagine there's other firms like yours, but how does your firm stand out, or how do you get to this point? And I know you're humble, so you'll say things that have nothing to do with you, but how does someone get to serve those types of huge, desirable companies?
Well, one is our firm has been around for 45 years, and we built a strong track record of bringing leaders into organizations. And so people will say, what have you done in this area? Have you ever recruited a top healthcare leader? And so we will give a case study or a narrative about the leaders we have put in place and the kind of impact and change they've had in their roles. And so that becomes a story for us to share with other companies.
Your track record of success.
Track record and why we do what we do.
Okay.
But the other thing is we believe that we're good listeners, and because getting the fit right is important. Too often people get hired for technical competencies, but they get fired for leadership deficiencies. And those leadership deficiencies have to do with style and fit and chemistry. And so we believe that the work we do enables us to become masters of fit, to understand what kinds of individuals will work well in a particular culture and organization.
And I imagine technology, like in every industry, is now playing a part in yours, but what you do still requires a lot of in-person, a lot of human-to-human interaction, not just technology-based solutions for finding candidates.
That's right. Today, the technology enables us to just find people,
right?
And that's a commodity.
Volume.
That's
Yeah.
right. I mean, there was a day when I started in this business 20 plus years ago where finding people was the real art. But today you can find people online, but what you can't necessarily do or what you need is someone who provides good judgment and insight on how to assess those individuals and their capabilities for doing the job that needs to be done, and to assess them for fit and chemistry in terms of the organization. So there's a human dimension that's needed, and judgment that needs to be exercised in the context of finding leaders for organizations.
And you are like the ultimate people person. That phrase gets overused, but I imagine that has served you well in the role that you're in, because you can relate to different types of people really well. And I was coming here today thinking about the different places you and I have been together over the years. I actually wrote them down. We were on the floor at a Golden State Warriors game together, just watching a great basketball game in San Francisco.
Yep.
Another time we were in a more formal setting in London, England, at Westminster Abbey with our wives, and went to Wimbledon. A little more buttoned up, so to speak, than at the Warriors game. And then we also, though, have been in the mountains of North Carolina at Windy Gap together, meeting with all types of people from every walk of life.
Yes.
But in each of those settings, Dale, you were, it seemed like, equally comfortable in those different environments. I don't know if you've ever noticed this about yourself, but where do you think you are when you feel most alive or most at ease?
That's a tough question.
Because you're at ease in a lot of settings.
Yeah, I think having grown up with a dad who had a store, a cobbler store, where we interacted with people from all walks of life who'd come in to get their shoes repaired, right?
That's true, yeah.
And then we worked in as janitors in these country clubs where we had to clean buildings and grout and so forth. Wow. With folks who were very affluent. And so I think at an early age, I just learned how to be around lots of different people with different experiences.
That takes humility too, though.
Well, it does, right. That's right. And I think my father was an example of that, where he was running his business during the day, but he was also sort of the quiet, invisible worker at night. And so I saw him sort of play both of those roles, and knew how important it is sometimes to be invisible behind the scenes and to serve, but also when are we to be up front and to lead. And being able to modulate that's important in the right setting.
And I'm sure even at home, as a single father, I'm sure you and your brothers were perfect young men, but once in a while he might have had to be a father and provide some direction or a little review of expectations, be a little more assertive, right?
Yes, absolutely.
But yeah, that would probably lead to you developing your character traits that I'm describing and saying how fond I am of yours in terms of being able to relate to different people. Are there certain character traits right now, maybe, in this COVID or post-COVID environment? Are there certain traits among the leaders you're recruiting or working with, either good or bad traits, that you're seeing more of right now?
Well, a couple of traits that I think are an important ingredient and necessary for leading. One has to do with vulnerability, because we've been in this environment of the pandemic and the polarization of in cancel culture. Can leaders be vulnerable? And vulnerable, the root of it, the Latin is, it has to do with brokenness. It has to do with being transparent. And so I think there's a level of vulnerability that's often needed in today's environment for leaders to be genuine, authentic in how they lead. And the younger generation's looking for leaders who are willing to be more transparent and vulnerable in how they lead and bring teams together. And so that is, I think, an important aspect of leadership.
I'm writing that down. Vulnerability is a key component, I think, of humility. It's hard to be vulnerable if you're not humble.
Right.
And our mutual friend, Doug Holliday, one of my mentors, is always talking about being authentic, a synonym of vulnerable. But you're using vulnerable in a way I hadn't heard too often. So thank you for that. I want to think more about the vulnerability aspect. I feel like listening also. I think listening is the most underrated, in my opinion, aspect of being a good leader is being a good listener.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and also admitting that we don't have all the answers.
For sure.
And so there's a level of vulnerability to admit that I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to step in and lean in and to have an impact and bring others along the way to help me do that. The other is resilience.
Okay.
You know, we are in an environment where people have been through tremendous change, whether it be the business cycle, whether it be the fact that we're in this demographic drought and need more laborers,
right.
Or whether it's coming out of the pandemic, or the fact that there's what we call the great resignation, people are leaving their jobs, or people working from home, and how do you create community and
what
culture?
What do you think about that? Will that end, or is that a new scenario that's going to be something we all have to deal with as employers, bosses, leaders, that folks don't want to work, or they want to work less, or they want to work remotely? Like, where do you think that goes?
Yeah, I think we're on an inflection point, and it's not the great resignation, but to me it's the great reexamination.
Interesting.
And people are reexamining their lives and in what they value. And how much they want to work, how much they want to play, and where they want to live, and how they want to do it. And so we see employees today have more control and more leverage than ever before. So there are people who say, sure, I'll come and be the vice president or executive vice president of this company, but I'm not going to move from Dallas. I'll just commute from Dallas to Chicago.
And are leaders accepting that well, or not yet?
Well, it's both. I think leaders are challenged with how do you build a culture and a team remotely? How do you lead at a distance? And some of it's happening. Some companies are working at it better than others. We've all been living in Zoom hell for the last.
Oh my gosh, too many.
Yep. And so some folks are craving the strong emotional connection, physical presence. And some prefer not having it. They love the the quarantine,
convenience of being at home,
as well. So
right.
so I think we're in this inflection point where we don't know what the end is going to look like.
Isn't that an odd time to be in, where we don't know the future of office buildings or corporate headquarters staffing situations?
Yes. Yep.
What an unusual time.
That's right. But we do know from the data that we're in a demographic drought here, where the number of young people going to college is declining. The birth rate has declined.
Right.
The immigration rate of people coming into the country has declined. And so the question is, where are the workers going to come from who have left jobs to go do other things? And so the restaurant, hospitality industry experiences this greatly. The agricultural community is experiencing this. So we're in this demographic drought.
Yes.
And baby boomers are checking out in record numbers. So baby boomers have retired in 2020 at an alarming accelerated rate than ever before. So these are interesting times to think about talent and experience,
right.
And people sort of unplugging.
It's probably pretty
levels.
interesting to be in your line of work right now. I'm sure there are challenges, but it's probably pretty interesting, a kind of petri dish of experimentation and seeing what works or what doesn't resonate with potential candidates.
Yes, and we're seeing wages increase because companies are having to be competitive for talent.
Right.
And we're seeing some levels of concern about how high wages are increasing, not just hourly wages, but compensation in general.
Yeah, one of my best friends lives in Cleveland, and he flips houses, residential house flipping, and I think they did like 25 homes in 2021, and about a fifth of them were California workers who wanted to live in the low cost of living Cleveland, but their companies were tolerating them working remotely, kind of like what you're talking about.
Yes.
But it was a better lifestyle, presumably, for them. It was lower pace, less traffic. Their dollars go further.
Yes.
And that's not permanent, but that's pretty long-term when you're buying a home. You're laying roots in a different city.
That's right.
That's not just like a Zoom call. That's like years and years of Zoom calls, probably.
That's right. And you think some cities and municipalities have a higher tax burden.
Right.
And so that exacerbates the issue you just described.
Yeah.
Do I live in L.A., California, Los Angeles, California versus Austin, Texas?
Big migration to Austin right now.
That's right. There's no state income tax in Texas or Florida or Tennessee and Nevada.
The second best podcast in America, the Joe Rogan Experience, just moved to Austin, Texas. It's the second best Todd after Up To, of course.
Yes.
Our producer's laughing here in the corner. I'm grateful that Calfee, Halter, and Griswold has once again agreed to partner with us. With offices in Ohio and Washington, D.C., this full-service national law firm focuses on all aspects of business and the law, including corporate and finance, intellectual property, and government relations. Let me be clear. I actually approach companies with whom I would like to partner. We just don't accept marketing dollars from anyone. I have been referring my CEO and entrepreneur friends to Calfee for years. I really believe in the firm. One of their notable practice areas is in mergers and acquisitions. And recently, for instance, I introduced a successful entrepreneur in the Midwest to Calfee when he told me that a European-based conglomerate wanted to buy his business. Calfee works with large corporations as well as privately held companies throughout the U.S. and Canada and in Europe and Asia too. So whether it's selling your own business or the more routine needs of creating your first will or anything in between, this firm can really do it all in terms of legal needs. Once again, the firm is Calfee, Halter, and Griswold, and you can find them at calfee.com or on the Up To Foundation website. So we're talking about people choosing to live in different cities. Let's talk a little bit about you if we can. You've been in different industries too. You're in banking. Mm-hmm. We've talked a lot about her in the talent business and executive search. You were also in venture capital for a while, financial services. How do you go about making career decisions? I'm always interested in hearing how successful people decide to turn left or to turn right during these moments of whys in the road when presumably both options are good. But how did you go about deciding to get into financial services or to leave it to go to your current industry? How do you go about doing that?
Well, I'll tell you, my roadmap has been all but linear. It's
all
anything
but linear.
Yeah. The truth is, I think, Adam, I have responded more to calling, and that is, what do I feel called or excited about doing at this season of my life? And I don't recommend that for everybody, but it has worked for me. And so I started my career out of college as a banker, and then I spent some time in the not-for-profit sector. And then I went back into business, where I worked in the executive recruiting world.
So you went right from banking to nonprofit.
To not-for-profit.
That's interesting.
Yes, yeah. I ran a not-for-profit around the Olympic Games in Atlanta for a number of years,
okay.
bringing together
I didn't know that.
Faith leaders and community leaders to build homes and to host family members and youth sports programs for several years. And then I got into the executive search business, and then I took a hiatus from there to work with our friend Steve Case with Revolution
right.
and global water projects in Africa, and then went back to the search business.
But like, what leads to each of those changes? Like, how do you decide?
Well, there was a point of restlessness in each of them.
Because often it's easier to stay in the current role.
That's right.
A lot of people, they stay in their current role. They're working more than they're at home,
yes.
but they're not happy with it.
Yeah.
I like that you've had the courage to make these moves a few different times.
Yeah. Well, and I merit well because my wife has supported
that's
me
a key part.
in stepping out of what I was doing to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
And I've enjoyed every season of my life, but I also have a life partner who supported me in that, so that we could explore those things together.
That definitely makes it easier.
Yes, it does. That when someone's with you, supports you, even though you don't have all the answers of where you're going, what you're going to do, makes a big difference.
So you evaluate the potential change with your wife, you just said. You also think about what season of life you're in. Are there any other factors that people could consider when deciding to make a change?
Is to seek good counsel. There's a proverb that says that
wisdom comes from an abundance of counselors.
That's right. Yeah, in a multitude of counselors, there's safety, there's wisdom.
And I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I love that.
It's great. But in every case, I went to friends and people whom I respect, and they gave confirmation. That perhaps that was the journey I should be on.
Right.
And some of them even put the downside risk of doing those things.
Which is healthy to hear that.
Yes, that's right. And so...
Because we can sometimes have our own conclusion and then fit the pluses and minuses to get to that conclusion anyway. So it's helpful to get someone who knows you well to be honest with you.
Yep.
Tough love.
Tough love. And in several changes, I had several friends create what's the upside of doing this and what's the downside? What are the strengths of the positives and the negatives? And so that helped me have some realism in it, but also confirmation as well. So it is, and for me, it's being very prayerful and meditative, so that my spirit resonates with the decision, but also having confirmation from family and friends and counselors who give an objective point of view about things.
Do you think you ever made a misstep because you didn't seek enough counsel, or you maybe reflect backwards, I should have done this instead of that? Or did you feel like you always made the right move given the season of life that you were in? I mean, you're in a great place now, so it's all worked out great, but I don't know if you've ever made a misstep.
So there may have been times when good became the enemy to the best, and I don't know that I made big decisions that were not right for us. It may be that the good Lord just redeemed them.
Okay, yeah.
Redeemed our own
Good
mistakes.
way of looking at it.
Yeah, and got us through it. But there are little decisions I've made of did I buy the right car? Did I go to the right place this time?
Sure.
For vacation, or did I buy the right house or the right neighborhood, or did we send our kids to the right schools? I mean, so you have things that you review and look back on and wonder if you made the right decision, but hope in the end that it would be redeemed
Right.
and come together. Yeah.
You mentioned that you lean on others to help you make some of these decisions. Are you now finding that people ask you to help them with their decisions? Like, are you aware of how many people rely on you as a mentor, or as someone just follows how you behave and how you live your life? Do you think about that very much?
Yeah, I'm involved in the lives of a number of folks who've asked me to come alongside and give them advice and counsel and levels of mentorship. And so that's a part of the journey I've been on for a number of years with a number of people who are either emerging leaders, some of them are students, and some of them are folks in business who just need a trusted advisor to come along and hear their thoughts and give a point of view. What
are the most common questions maybe about students that I know you're still involved as a board member at Morehouse College, which is tremendous, but what are some of the common maybe missteps you help keep the students you mentor from making?
Well, many of them over-exercise on their major. What am I going to study? And sometimes they get paralyzed.
Too bogged down with that.
Too bogged down with what their undergraduate degree will be in. And I often try to free them up to say, there are things you can do that may not have a lot to do with what you're ultimately going to be doing. I talked to the former CEO of Goldman Sachs, who was a history major, and so he said he eventually went back to business school, but he started out as a history major, and so there are. I try to free people up from feeling like
it's mentally relieving.
Yes, that's right. That's right. That what they major or get their degree in will now predetermine
not
everything.
A permanent path.
That's right. That's right. Unless you're going into sort of the deep sciences or an area that's highly technical, where you've got to get started early.
What about the recent piece that you wrote? I think I've reread it twice, and I might pull from it with your permission for the newsletter that I do for Up To, but it got a lot of attention on LinkedIn and probably elsewhere, but you talked about gratitude being maybe less emphasized than it should be in the leadership class. What inspired you to write that piece?
One is I felt that it was an understated attribute. But I do recall spending time listening to the founder of Zoom, and he was giving attribution to the qualities that have helped him be who he is.
Okay.
And he talked about gratitude, and that it was his gratitude towards the team and others that kept him humble and grounded. And so I began to think about not only that quality in him, but also in other leaders, and how it is the right quality that does provide the kind of leveling you need when we get caught up in
Leveling.
self.
Good word. Yeah. Caught up in self.
Yeah.
I mean, these are just little phrases you're rolling off here that we could spend a lot of time on. Do you do much writing? Like, that was a really good piece. Do you do that often? And
I'm beginning to do more.
Yeah, keep doing it.
I'm starting a series of leadership attributes that I'm writing about, and so I'm working on another for the end of the year. That will
Can you
come out.
preview what the topic is, or?
Yeah, I will. So that one was gratitude.
Right.
The next one's vulnerability.
Vulnerability.
So
Good.
Look for vulnerability. That's the piece that I'm going to focus on in the next.
A grateful nation awaits your next musing that you're going to be putting out.
Kai.
Yeah. Now, I also, preparing for today, I read about a major award you won not too long ago from your peers in your industry. Congratulations.
Thank you.
A lot of people talk about being the best at what they do, whatever it is, being a chef or a car mechanic or a teacher, but you literally have reached the top of your industry. Do you ever think much about who's following you, maybe who you're inspiring from afar? Not the students that you're directly interacting with, but I bet you're having a bigger impact on those who follow your work than you even realize.
Well, I sure hope so. It is. To whom much is given, much is required. And so my hope is that my life will be an open book to those who would want to know the journey I've been on and how it has created opportunity and success for us. But I also want people to know that it's not just about me. It's been that I'm standing on the shoulders of giants in the context of my life, of my family, of the ministers and the community, my wife, my kids. All have inspired and motivated me to be who I am.
And all that your father did without his wife at a young age, man, very impressive. I didn't know that about your background. And that's probably affected what type of parent you became, the way your father parented you. I don't know if you became more of how he was or less. Sometimes there's a pendulum effect.
Right.
But have you thought about that much?
Well, I have not thought about it much, but I do know that the level of sacrifice my father made for us doesn't come close to the sacrifices with me and our family. He paid an ultimate sacrifice of working 2 jobs night and day, and lost his health in the midst of it, and made great sacrifices, never to marry again, to keep his sons for it. So I don't know that I could ever accomplish on the sacrificial pendulum of what he did for us. But I've tried in some small way to love my wife and love my kids and create opportunities for them.
Well, your humility, again, is coming out. You're doing very well in all of those regards. I didn't have the honor of knowing your father, but he seems like a really special human being. A couple of years ago, I don't know if you know this, but the United Kingdom, they established a cabinet-level position to address loneliness. There's a minister of loneliness, believe it or not, in the UK. And earlier we were talking a little bit about being a leader and the different unintended consequences of success that our mutual friend Doug Holliday often talks about. Does it ever get lonely being like the big boss at your company? I was thinking this after talking to you about your father never being married again. You have a wonderful wife who I've met. You have a team at work, but has loneliness ever affected you given your kind of high professional stature?
It has. I mean, I think when you're leading an organization or giving some responsibility for leadership, there are times when it does feel alone. You do feel alone.
Right.
And I've had times when I felt alone.
Only so many people can relate to what you're going through.
That's right. But I also have felt incredibly supported by others. But sometimes you have to make decisions about people, about situations that only you can make.
Right.
And so there are moments where it does feel like the dark night of the soul, and you've got to work through it through your own meditation and prayer.
I'm passionate about peer groups
Yes.
to address this.
Right.
I think you're from the YPO world a little bit.
Yes, that's right.
Me, YEO and a few other groups, Legatus, a group of Catholic CEOs, and we do some peer group activities with Path North. But I really believe in the experience sharing.
Yes,
and
huge.
the more we have in common with each other, the more helpful we can be with one another.
That's right, yes.
So I don't know if you have any peer groups now, like mentor-mentee is one thing, husband-wife is another, but a group of peers, and I think that's why AA became as influential as it was, because they're a group of peers, or certain types of equals.
Yes.
And my father was an alcoholic and then a recovering alcoholic, and he taught me the power of peer groups and how peers know when you're telling the truth and when you're BSing a little bit, and they hold you accountable and they give you that tough love. So I love peer groups. Yeah.
Well, and that's been the secret to some of my success is being a part of on the journey with a few friends who will give you advice, will give you comfort, and will challenge you along the way. And
it's healthy.
It is very healthy, absolutely.
It addresses that loneliness I brought up, but it also helps us be better versions of ourselves.
That's right. Yeah, there's a proverb that says, "Faithful are the wounds of a friend," right? And so for friends who will be honest with us, truth tellers to us, but also will bring comfort and encouragement.
Right.
Yes.
Well, what are you most excited about right now?
Gosh, well.
I mean, today came. You were most excited about being on the Up To podcast. Now that's almost over.
That's right.
What's the next big thing on your life list?
Well, we've just entered into the season of Advent.
Right.
And for some, it's the season of Hanukkah. But this has been a long, tough year, but very rewarding. And so I'm looking forward to unplugging and spending time with family and having sort of a sabbatical moment to read, reflect, walk, think, and just unplug. So I'm ready for a sabbatical journey here for the next. It's not going to start now, but in a couple of weeks before the new year.
Well, that sounds good to me. Sign me up for that. It's always remarkable how fast the time goes when we sit down in front of these microphones, Dale.
Yes.
We covered on some powerful topics today, so thank you for sharing so openly and authentically. So I guess we can thank you right now and then unplug, so to speak, this episode of the Up To podcast. But thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Adam. Great to be with you.
Thank you for listening to the Up To podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe via your podcast platform of choice. To receive our newsletter, suggest speakers, and give your candid feedback, please email Adam directly at adam@uptofoundation.org. We would love to hear from you. The Up To podcast is produced by the BL Media Group right outside of the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. See you next time.